The arrival of the killer. The sky above New Haven Colony was a sea of stars, twinkling softly against the darkness. It was a peaceful night. People walked through the marketplace, talking, laughing, and enjoying their simple lives. They had no idea that death had arrived among them. In the shadows, Dracon watched. He stood tall, covered in a dark cloak, his face hidden. His eyes, sharp and cold, scanned the crowd. He was not like the people here. He was not human. He was a hunter, a killer, a ghost in the night. He had never failed a mission. Dracon had ended the lives of kings, warlords, and rebels. He had taken down entire armies alone. His body was not just flesh. It was enhanced with alien technology, making him stronger, faster, and deadlier than any human. He felt no fear, no guilt, no hesitation. And tonight, he had one target: Elias Grant, the leader of this human colony. The Galactic Council had ordered his death. Elias was a problem, a leader who refused to bow to the powerful rulers of the galaxy. His speeches inspired rebellion. His actions gave people hope. The Council wanted that hope crushed. That was why Dracon was here. He moved through the streets, silent as a shadow. His enhanced vision locked onto his target. Elias Grant stood near a small food stall, talking to his people, smiling as he helped an old woman carry supplies. Dracon had killed many like him before. This should have been easy. But something felt wrong. As he observed the humans, something inside him twisted. They were laughing, helping each other, enjoying their lives. There was no fear, no cruelty, no battle for survival. It was different from the places he had seen before. Dracon pushed the feeling away. Emotions were a weakness. He reached for his weapon, a small silver blade hidden under his cloak. One quick movement, and it would be over. Elias Grant would be dead before he even realized what happened. But before Dracon could move, a little girl ran into him. She had bright blue eyes and dark curly hair. She was no older than 6. She had been running too fast and bumped straight into his leg. She looked up at him, eyes wide. Dracon froze. Most people, when they saw him, felt terror. They ran, screamed, begged for mercy. But this child, she just smiled. "I'm sorry, mister," she said cheerfully. "I wasn't looking where I was going." Dracon stared at her. His mind screamed at him to move, to complete the mission. But for the first time in his life, he felt something strange, something he could not understand. The girl held out a small round object. "Here," she said, "you drop this." Dracon looked down. It was a small metal coin, a simple trinket. It was not his, but the girl thought it was, and she wanted to help. He took it without thinking. The girl smiled wider. "You're new here, right? Welcome to New Haven. My name's Layla." Before he could respond, her mother called her from across the street. The girl waved at Dracon and ran off, disappearing into the crowd. Dracon stood there, motionless. Something felt different. Why had she not been afraid? Why had she smiled at him? This was not how people acted around him. He was a killer, a monster. No one had ever looked at him with kindness before. He clenched his fist, trying to erase the strange feeling building inside him. He turned back toward Elias Grant, but something inside him hesitated. The voices in his head, his training, his orders, his duty, told him to strike now, but his body did not move. Instead, for the first time in his existence, Dracon was unsure. And in that hesitation, something deep inside him began to change. The unexpected kindness. Dracon had faced death more times than he could count. He had walked through fire, survived endless battles, and executed missions in the darkest corners of the galaxy. He had seen empires fall, planets burn, and enemies beg for mercy. But never in his life had he been offered a piece of bread. He stared at the warm loaf in front of him, steam still rising from it. The old woman at the market stall smiled at him, her wrinkled face full of kindness. "You look hungry." "Traveler," she said. "Take it. No charge." Drakon did not move. His instincts screamed at him. This was a trick, a test, a trap. No one gave something for free. Everything had a cost. Every kindness had a hidden blade. He had learned this as a child. On his homeworld, mercy was weakness. The strong took what they wanted. The weak were nothing but dust beneath their feet. He had been trained to expect betrayal, to never trust, to always be ready to kill. And yet, this human woman stood before him, offering him food, expecting nothing in return. "Take it," she urged gently. "You look like you've traveled far." Drakon reached out, his gloved hand hovering over the bread. His fingers twitched. This was wrong. This was not how things worked. His hand closed around the loaf. It was soft, warm, real, a simple thing. But to him, it felt alien. "Thank you." The words escaped him before he could stop them. The woman beamed at him as if he had given her a gift, not the other way around. "Kindness keeps the soul alive," she said, nodding. "Welcome to New Haven, stranger." She turned away, moving back to her stall. Drakon stood there, frozen. The bread in his hand felt heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Why did this disturb him more than any battlefield? He turned and walked through the market, his mind a storm of thoughts. He was supposed to observe, to study the humans, to understand their patterns before striking. But the more he watched, the more wrong everything felt. These people were not warriors. They did not live in fear. They did not fight for survival every second of their lives. They smiled. They helped each other. They shared food, stories, laughter. This was not how the universe worked. A child ran past him, laughing as she chased a small floating drone. A man lifted his son onto his shoulders, pointing at the sky. A group of workers sat together, eating and joking after a long day's labor. Drakon had been in many places, war zones, slaughterhouses, burning cities, but never in a place like this. Never in a place where people simply lived, and for the first time in his life, he found himself questioning everything he had been taught. He reached into his cloak and felt the cold handle of his weapon. His mission was clear. He had never hesitated before. But now he wasn't sure. And uncertainty was the most dangerous thing of all. A taste of humanity. Drakon had always believed that silence was the only true peace. The quiet after a kill, the stillness of a battlefield, the hush of a dying enemy, those were the moments he understood. But now, sitting at a rough wooden table in the middle of New Haven's marketplace, surrounded by laughter, conversation, and the scent of fresh food, he realized something strange. He wasn't uncomfortable. He should have been. He should have hated the noise, the closeness of so many people, the sound of children playing. But instead, he found himself listening, not for threats, not for weaknesses, but simply listening. Across from him, a large man with a thick beard slapped his shoulder and let out a booming laugh. "You don't talk much, do you, friend?" Drakon's fingers twitched toward his concealed weapon, but he forced himself to stop. The man was not a threat, just friendly. A bowl of steaming stew was placed in front of him by a woman with kind eyes. "Eat," she said. "You're too thin for a traveler." Drakon looked down at the food. It smelled good. His enhanced body didn't require much food, but something about the gesture made his chest feel tight. Why were they doing this? "What's your name, stranger?" the bearded man asked. Names. Names were dangerous. Names meant attachment. Names meant history. For years, he had been only a shadow, a nameless force sent to end lives. But now, as he sat here in this warm light, with people looking at him not with fear but with curiosity, he felt an unfamiliar urge. "Drakon," he said at last. The man grinned. "Drakon, huh? Strong name. I'm Joran. "This is my wife, Ilara." Ilara gave him a smile and pushed a loaf of bread toward him. "It's good to have a new face in town." Drakon stared at the bread. Good to have him. No one had ever said that before. No one had ever wanted him anywhere. He was a weapon, a tool, a ghost in the dark. And yet these people welcomed him without question. Something inside him twisted, something that had never existed before. Regret. He wasn't sure why, but the weight of his mission suddenly felt heavier than ever. His target, Elias Grant, was not far away. He could see him speaking with a group of settlers, his voice filled with confidence and warmth. A leader, not a tyrant. Drakon should be planning his approach. He should be analyzing weaknesses. He should be thinking about the quickest way to complete his mission. But all he could think about was the taste of bread in his mouth. It was warm, soft, real, and for the first time in his life, he wondered, what if there was another way? The assassin becomes the protector. Drakon had seen death in many forms. The slow fade of a dying soldier. The silent collapse of a target struck in the heart. The explosion of a ship vaporizing everything inside. But never before had he feared it. Not until now. Not until he saw the second assassin. It happened suddenly. The warm lights of the colony, the laughter of the people, the strange peace he had felt, it all shattered in an instant. A sound, a shift in the air. Drakon's instincts flared. His head snapped toward the rooftops. There, a figure cloaked in black, perched like a vulture, a long-range energy rifle aimed directly at Elias Grant. Drakon moved before he could think. The shot fired. Time slowed. He lunged, crashing into Elias, knocking him to the ground. The energy blast seared the air where the human leader had been standing a second before. Screams erupted around them. People ran, ducking behind stalls, pulling children into shelter. The peaceful marketplace turned into chaos. Elias gasped beneath him, eyes wide. "What? Ho!" Drakon ignored him. His eyes locked onto the assassin on the rooftop. A brother, a hunter, a replacement. They had sent someone else. The council had grown impatient. Drakon stood, his movements precise, calculated. The second assassin did not hesitate. They leaped from the rooftop, landing in a crouch, drawing twin blades that crackled with red energy. The message was clear. Drakon had hesitated. Drakon had failed. Now he would die with the humans he refused to kill. For the first time in his life, he was the hunted. And yet, he was not afraid. Because for the first time, he had something worth fighting for. The assassin lunged. Drakon met them head-on. Blades clashed, energy crackling against metal. The force of the impact sent a shockwave through the street. Sparks flew as Drakon twisted, blocking a killing strike and countering with a brutal kick. The other assassin staggered but recovered instantly. They were fast, trained, just like him. No, exactly like him. Drakon recognized the technique, the precision, the ruthlessness. The assassin had been trained in the same pits, forged in the same merciless fire, a younger version of himself. But Drakon was no longer that man. The assassin struck again, but this time, Drakon did not meet them with brute force. He sidestepped at the last second. The assassin stumbled. It was a small mistake, but in their world, small mistakes were fatal. Drakon moved in a blur, grabbing the assassin's wrist, twisting. Snap! The energy blade fell from their hand. Drakon seized their collar and slammed them into the ground. Hard. The assassin gasped in pain, their mask cracking, revealing a pair of young, terrified eyes. Drakon hesitated. The council had sent a child, just like they had sent him years ago. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The assassin lay beneath him, defeated, waiting for the final blow. The old Drakon would have killed them without thought, but that version of him was already dead. Instead, he released the assassin's collar, stood, and turned his back. The younger assassin's eyes widened. Their breathing was ragged, confused. They did not understand. Neither did Draken. But something deep inside him whispered that this was the moment. The moment he stopped being a weapon. The moment he chose his own path. The assassin vanished into the shadows, retreating. Draken let them go. As he turned, he met the stunned gaze of Elias Grant. The human leader had watched everything. "You just saved my life," Elias said quietly. Draken exhaled. He glanced at the people around him, scared but alive. And he realized something. He was no longer an assassin. He was a protector now. The final battle. A choice that changes everything. Draken had always believed the universe had no mercy, no second chances, no kindness. But as he stood there, blood dripping from his fingertips, surrounded by humans who should have feared him, but didn't, he realized something terrifying. He was changing, and the galaxy would never forgive him for it. The second assassin had fled, but Draken knew what that meant. More were coming. The Council never sent just one. He had broken the contract, betrayed his masters, and for that, there would be no forgiveness. He had chosen to protect instead of kill. And now he would pay for it. A deep mechanical hum filled the air. A shadow passed over the colony. The people looked up, fear gripping them as a massive warship descended from the sky. Draken's stomach tightened. They sent a purifier. Not just assassins this time. Not just a warning. They had sent a ship built for one purpose: to erase the entire colony from existence. The humans didn't understand what was coming. They had no idea what kind of death was about to rain down on them. Draken did. He had been the one to command these ships before. He had been the one to stand on the other side, watching from above as entire cities were burned to the ground. And now, for the first time, he was on the ground. With the people. With the ones who had shown him kindness. He clenched his fists. He would not let them die. The ship's weapons powered up, glowing red in the night sky. Draken moved. Faster than any human could see, he sprinted toward the colony's defense systems, weak, outdated, almost useless against a warship. But he wasn't human. His hands flew across the controls, overriding the system. He knew the ship's attack patterns. He knew its weaknesses. For years, he had been the Council's weapon. Now, he would turn that knowledge against them. The first energy blast fired from the warship. Draken reacted instantly. He activated the colony's shield generator, barely managing to deflect the attack. Sparks erupted from the console. The system wouldn't last long. Behind him, Elias and the other settlers had gathered, watching him work, trusting him, trusting the killer who had come to destroy them. He turned to them. "Get to the shelters. Now." Elias hesitated. "And you?" Draken's eyes flicked back to the sky, to the warship that would not stop until everything was ash. "I finished this." And then he ran. Straight into the storm. The ship deployed ground forces, armored soldiers dropping down like steel rain. They surrounded the colony, weapons raised. Draken didn't slow down. They weren't ready for him. He hit the first soldier like a thunderclap, ripping the rifle from their hands and shattering their helmet with a single punch. He moved like a ghost, a blur of motion and destruction. One by one, they fell. This was what he was made for. But for the first time, he was fighting for something real. A blast hit him in the shoulder. Pain seared through him, but he didn't stop. He tore a weapon from a fallen soldier, turned, and fired. Perfect shot, instant kill. He was winning. But the ship was still there, still charging its main cannon. One blast would wipe the colony off the map. He had one chance. One impossible, suicidal chance. He sprinted toward the nearest enemy dropship, jumped onto the hull, and tore open the cockpit with his bare hands. The pilot didn't even have time to scream. Within seconds, he was in control. He pulled the ship up, engines roaring, pushing straight toward the warship above. They didn't see it coming. Or maybe they did. Maybe they just never expected him to do this. Because Dracon never disobeyed orders. Until now. Until he saw what mercy looked like. Until he knew what kindness tasted like. Until he had something worth dying for. The warship loomed closer. The radio crackled. "Dracon, stand down." He didn't respond. The cannon was almost charged. He pushed the engines to their limit. One shot, one chance. He aimed straight for the core. And then, impact. A blinding explosion filled the sky. The colony below watched in stunned silence as the warship broke apart, fiery wreckage raining down like fallen stars. The sky burned. And Dracon was gone. A new life begins. Dracon had never believed in the afterlife. In his world, death was nothing but an ending. Cold, empty, absolute. A mission completed. A contract closed. No second chances. No redemption. So when he opened his eyes, he expected darkness. Instead, he saw light. Soft, warm, golden. It flickered above him, dancing across wooden beams. The scent of herbs and clean linen filled his senses. His body ached, but the pain was dull, distant. He was alive. That was impossible. He tried to sit up, but a firm hand pressed against his chest. "Easy," a voice said. He turned his head, muscles screaming in protest. Elias Grant sat beside him, his expression calm but watchful. The colony leader looked different now. Not a target, not a man he had once been sent to kill, but something else. Someone Dracon had saved. "You should be dead," Elias continued. "That was quite a stunt you pulled." Dracon blinked, memories rushing back. The stolen ship, the warship's core, the explosion. He should have been vaporized. Elias seemed to read his thoughts. "We pulled you from the wreckage. You were barely breathing." He hesitated, then added, "Layla wouldn't let us leave you behind." The girl. The child who had first shown him kindness. Dracon exhaled, staring at the ceiling. The weight of everything settled over him like an invisible force. He had done the impossible. He had betrayed the council, destroyed one of their ships, and survived. But what now? "You're a hero to them, you know," Elias said. Dracon turned his head sharply. "I am not a hero." Elias smiled faintly. "Try telling that to the people out there." Dracon frowned. He shifted his body, testing his strength. He was weak but healing. His enhanced body was working hard to repair itself. Soon, he would be strong again. And then the council would come. He knew this wasn't over. The warship's destruction would not go unanswered. The people of New Haven were in more danger now than ever before. "You should have let me die," Dracon muttered. Elias leaned back, considering him. "Maybe, but that's not what we do here." The words struck something deep inside Dracon, something he wasn't ready to face. A creak from the doorway made him turn. Leela peeked inside, her bright eyes filled with excitement. She hesitated, then grinned. "Told you he was too strong to die." Dracon didn't know how to respond. He had survived battlefields, assassins, warships. But this was uncharted territory. She ran up and placed something beside him on the bed. A small, round object. A metal coin. The same one she had given him the first day they met. The first day everything changed. Dracon stared at it. For the first time, he understood. This was not just survival, not just another mission. This was a choice. A new life had begun. And for the first time in his existence, Dracon had to decide what to do with it. The legend of the killer turned guardian. Once, the galaxy spoke of Dracon the assassin, a name whispered in fear, a shadow that ended lives without hesitation. Now, they spoke of something else. They spoke of the traitor who turned against his masters. They spoke of the assassin who chose to protect instead of kill. And in the far reaches of space, where warlords and rulers clutched their power with iron fists, one question spread like wildfire. Why? New Haven, 1 month later. Drakon stood at the edge of the colony, watching the sky. The wounds on his body had healed, but something deeper inside him had changed. Something that would never heal the same way again. He had saved these people. He had destroyed the warship, broken free from the Council's chains, and survived. But the war was not over. He could feel it in the air, in the quiet tension of the settlers, in the way Elias watched the horizon with cautious eyes. The Council would not forget. They would come. And when they did, Drakon would be ready. Soft footsteps approached. "You planning to leave?" Elias's voice was calm, but there was something behind it, something close to regret. Drakon didn't answer immediately. He had spent his entire life moving from one place to another, leaving nothing behind but bodies. But this place, it was the first place that had ever felt like more than a battlefield. Elias stepped beside him. "You don't have to go, you know." Drakon exhaled. "If I stay, they will come for me. And when they do, they will burn everything to the ground to get to me." Elias smirked. "Then it's a good thing we've got you, isn't it?" Drakon turned to face him fully. "You don't understand. The people they send next, they won't be like the last ones." "We'll fight," Elias said simply. "And this time, you won't fight alone." Drakon blinked. The words hit harder than any blade ever had. "You won't fight alone." He looked over his shoulder at the colony. The people who had accepted him. The people who had saved him. The people who, despite knowing what he was, still trusted him. He thought about Leela and her coin. About Joran and his booming laugh. About Ilara handing him a loaf of bread as if he were just another weary traveler. A killer turned guardian. A monster turned protector. Could it really be that simple? A distant hum echoed through the sky. A ship approaching, barely visible beyond the clouds. Drakon straightened. His muscles tensed. The time had come. But this time, he was not alone. Elias placed a hand on his shoulder. "You said it yourself. They will come." He nodded toward the colony. "Let them." Drakon looked at the people gathering behind him, ready to stand, ready to fight. Not because they were soldiers, but because they had something worth protecting. Something worth believing in. He had spent his entire life as a weapon, a tool, a ghost in the dark. But now he had become something more. The sky darkened. The war was coming. And for the first time, Drakon welcomed it. Because this time, he was fighting for something real.